Very loser. I am sort of a loser. Pages numbered by Jim Smith. Super loser. I've always wanted to be a superhero like my favorite TV star, future rat boy. That's why I've started calling myself Super Loser. Practicing my flying. Super Loser's catchphrase is keel, which is what future rat boy says instead of cool. My superpower is loserkeelness, which is where I'm always coming up with brilliant and amazing ideas. Like the time my mum said she never had any surprises, so I hid in the airing cupboard dressed as a burglar and jumped out when she walked past. Loserkeelness is also where you accidentally tread in a dog poo, or turn the wart on your thumb into a remote control for yourself or something like that, and all your friends laugh and think you're really loserkeel. Everyone at school knows I'm the loserkeelest person ever. So imagine how annoying it was when Faye Snoggles came in one day acting even more loserkeel than me. Faye Snoggles. What's that white plastic board thingy hanging round your neck? Said Sharonella, as Faye walked through the classroom door with a white plastic board hanging round her neck. Faye pulled a big red marker pen out of her pocket and plopped the lid off. Got sore throat, she wrote on the board. Hurt to speak. This is Faye in case you didn't know. She wiped the board clean with a tissue and blew her nose like an elephant, leaving a red pen smudge on the end of her nose, and everyone laughed, apart from me. Oh my days, Faye, you are making me laugh, snorted Sharonella, who's been fake best friends with Faye ever since her real best friends Donatella and Tracy fell out with her for copying the way they draw dogs. Isn't this the sort of loserish thing you do, Barry? Burped Darren Darrenofsky, swinging Faye's board round and almost slicing the red bit off her nose. He flumped over his desk and poked me in the ear hole with his fat little finger. Yeah, except I'd do it 1,000,000 times more loserkeely, I said, pretending I wasn't bothered. I looked out the window at all the wind that was blowing, not that you can actually see wind even if you're a super loser like me. What wind looks like. A poster saying you could be class captain blew across the playground, and I remembered our teacher Miss Spivak saying the elections for class captain were coming up. You could be class captain? That poster was just talking about what you gonna do, Barry? Faye's comprly copying your loserkeelness, said Bunky, who's sort of like my sidekick. He poked his finger into my other ear hole, and I bonked him on the nose for being such a naughty best friendapuz. Because of all the fingers in my ears I couldn't really hear anything, apart from what I was thinking. Bunky's right, super loser. Faye's completely copying your loserkeelness, said the voice inside my head, and I imagined it coming out of a tiny little mini berry, sitting on my brain like it was a sofa. Yeah, super loser, you've got to come up with one of your brilliant and amaze-keel ideas, said another mini berry, and I nodded my head, imagining the mini berries falling off their brain sofa because of all the nodding was doing. Listening to your mini berries, are you? Said Nancy Verkenwerken's voice all of a sudden. I was just about to tell her to get out of my head, when I realized she'd pulled Darren and Bunky's fingers out of my ear holes and was speaking into my actual ear with her real-life mouth. Looks like you've got some competition, doesn't it? She smiled, pointing over at Faye, who was blowing her nose again, this time like a warthog. That's the annoying thing about Nancy, she can always tell what I'm thinking. Oh yeah, like I'm really bothered, I said, leaning back in my chair just enough to fall over. Arrgggh, screamed, waggling my arms around like the loserkeelest super loser ever. But nobody noticed, because they were all too busy laughing at Faye. Verbunkenloser whatever boxes. Verbunkenloser Ltd is me, Bunky and Nancy's new company. It only sells one thing at the moment, but in the future it's gonna be bigger than Fico's supermarkets. Roll up, get your Verbunkenloser whatever boxes here. Only a few left, shouted Nancy from behind the table tennis table in the playground, which is where we set up our pyramid of whatever boxes every lunchtime. When I first came up with the idea of selling old cereal boxes filled with whatever rubbish we had lying around, I wasn't sure anyone would buy them. But it's turned out to be a big hit, mainly thanks to Nancy. Asterisk only one thank, though. Ooh, me. Me, squeaked Jocelyn Twiggs, handing Nancy the dirtiest, bent-in-halfest coin ever and taking a box off the top of the pyramid. It was a Fico's cereal packet painted light blue, with the word whatever scribbled on it in black felt-tip pen. He ripped the lid off, stuck his hand inside and pulled out a worm. A real-life worm. Just what I've always wanted, he grinned. And it doubles up nicely as a bracelet, said Nancy, curling it round Jocelyn's wrist. Jocelyn did a face like he didn't know what was more funny, having a worm curled round your wrist or wearing a bracelet. Then he shrugged and bounced off, and I wondered if the worm was thinking it was all a bit funny too. Gordon smugly glided over and picked up a box, and the pyramid swayed. Good weight, interesting rattle. I'll take it, he said, putting a coin into my hand, and I popped it into the plastic Fico's ice cream tub, which is where we keep all our money. Is that the one? Whispered Bunky, and I snortle-nodded even though I wasn't really in a snortle-nodding sort of mood, what with Faye Compierly copying my loserkeelness and everything. Gordon slid his finger along the top of the box and opened the flap. Raisins, he smiled, grabbing a handful of tiny, brownish, dried-up, bobbly balls and opening his disgusting mouth. Yeah, my nostril raisins. Bunky laughed. EURGGGHHHYYUCK, screamed Gordon, throwing the bogies into the air, and they swirled off in the wind like tiny planets. Ha ha, nice one Bunky, he said, not wanting to look stupid, and he walked away with his box of bogey raisins still rattling. Nancy turned round and gave us one of her looks. If we're going to make a success of Verbunkenloser Ltd., we cannot afford to annoy our customers, she said, tidying up the pyramid. Another poster saying you could be class captain, blew in front of my eyes like a magician's cape. Sharonella and Faye appeared from behind it and I did a little blow-off out of shock and annoyedness. WHAHVA, said Sharonella, reading the box she'd picked up. What's inside? Not that I'm bothered. You never know with a Verbunkenloser whatever box, smiled Nancy like she was on TV. But everyone's a winner. Ooh, random. Go on Faye, you can't lose, said Sharonella, nudging Faye forwards, and I looked at the pyramid of whatever boxes swaying in the wind and came up with one of my brilliant and amazing ideas right there and then on the spot. Me coming up with one of my ideas. Faye pulled her pen out and plopped the lid off. One please, she wrote, sliding a coin towards Bunky and picking up a box. She opened the lid and peered inside. Rua bish, moaned Sharonella, as Faye's hand pulled out a smelly old hair clip with a faded plastic goldfish perched on it that I'd found down a drain. I stepped forwards and got ready to play at loser keel. Woohoo! Faye is a winner, everyone! I shouted, pretending to trip on a piece of gravel and fall towards the pyramid of whatever boxes. Argrg! I'm so 0000000 loserkeel. I screamed, crashing into them. Light blue boxes flew into the air like rectangle chunks of sky and my nose thudded onto the floor, me following behind it. That is so you, Barry, laughed Sharonella as I lay on the ground covered in whatever boxes, and I breathed a sigh of relief, because was back to being the loserkeelest person in my class. The end. Not really. Mobbed in poo. It felt good being the most loser-keel person in my class again, and to celebrate I'd come up with another one of my brilliant and amaze-keel ideas. It was the next day and we were in the school coach on the way to Mobbed in Poo. Mobbed in Poo is our town's swimming pool, except the L from the sign disappeared one night 8 million years ago and no one ever found it. Trunks wrapped in towel like a sandwich. Don't forget, aim them right for my nose. I whispered into Bunky's ear as we jumped out of the coach and ran into the changing rooms, Darren Darrenofsky blowing off with excitement behind us. One of the cool things about the changing rooms at Mogden Poo is that the girls and boys are right next to each other with a wall in between that doesn't go all the way up to the ceiling, so you can spy on the girls getting changed. "I can see Donatella's pants," screamed Stuart Schmendrix, wobbling on top of Darren and peering over the wall. "Arrgggghhh," shrieked the girls from their changing room, and I looked over at Bunky and gave him the signal. I was on the spying wall side of the room, doing my future rat boy super high-speed pants into swimming trunks change, and Bunky was by the door. I counted down from 5 in my head and got ready to look like the most loser keel super loser ever. The most loser keel super loser ever. The elastic strap on Bunky's swimming goggles twanged as they shot out of his hands towards my face. As they flew across the room, I went through the plan in my head. 1. Get hit in the nose by Bunky's goggles. 2. Start spinning around, screaming like a loser. 3. Tangle myself up in the towel hanging on the hook next to me. 4. Stumble into the showers like a blind ghost. 5. Accidentally turn on the water and end up lying in a puddle, groaning. I smiled to myself, imagining everyone laughing at how loser keel I was. Then I realized I'd managed to do the whole list inside my head and a smile to myself, all with the goggles still not hitting my nose. I looked up and saw them shooting over the wall into the girls' changing rooms. "Faye babes! Watch out!" screamed Sharonella, then everything went quiet. I climbed up Darren Darrenofsky, then Stuart Schmendrix, and peered over the wall. Faye was lying in a puddle in the showers, tangled up in a towel like a blind ghost, groaning, with all the girls laughing at how loser keel she looked. "It's exactly like you planned it, except it all happened to Faye instead," whispered a mini berry in my brain, and I tried to swivel my eyeballs all the way round and give him one of my looks. "Get your own loser keelness," I shouted, falling off Darren and Stuart and accidentally landing in the towel bin, which normally would have been really funny and loser keel, except everyone was too busy laughing at Faye. Nobody likes a show-off. "Work it, ladies," boomed an old wrinkled-up man in shiny shorts as I walked out to the swimming pool. His voice echoed off the water and bounced around the ginormous glass windows. He was dancing along the side of the pool, kicking his legs out and clapping his hands. The whole of his head was completely bald apart from a little gray beard that went all the way round his mouth, like a hairy donut. I looked into the water and saw now Granny Harumpadunk and her friends Ethel, Doreen and Three Thumb Rita from the sweet shop splashing about like they were being attacked by granny-eating sharks. "What in the keelness are they doing here?" whispered a mini berry inside my brain. Then I saw a sign that said Aqua Aerobics for the elderly and I nodded my head, imagining the mini berries falling off their brain sofa again. "Cooey, Barari," warbled my granny, waggling her arms at me, and I was just about to pretend I didn't know who she was when I had one of my brilliant and amaze keel ideas. I glanced along the pool at everyone about to start their lesson and took a deep breath. "Guani!" I shouted, running up to the edge of the water and doing the most loser keel jump ever. "Yay!" I screamed, landing with a massive splosh. I opened my eyes underwater and saw Doreen's bum waggling in my face. "Granny bums!" I shouted as my head bobbed out of the water and floated there like a duck. I was in between Doreen and Ethel, who were panting and marching on the spot in super slow underwater granny motion. "Go on girls, burn those biscuits off," boomed the old man with the hairy donut beard, and joined in with the grannies, looking over to see if anyone was watching my loser keelness. And that was when I spotted Faye limping out of the changing rooms wearing the whiteboard, with an inflatable ring round her waist. She was shivering from the shower and her hair was all over her face. "Blimey, Snoggles, what happened to you?" chuckled Mr. Coops, walking by behind her copying her limp, and everyone laughed, some of the old grannies in my aqua aerobics class included. "That's not funny, this is," I shouted, splashing about, giggling and blowing off because of how hilarious and loser keel I looked. Mr. Coops walked up the side of the pool and stopped next to Donut Beard. I carried on stomping my feet in slow motion and waggling my arms in the air like Ethel. Nobody likes a show-off, Barry, said Mr. Coops all quietly, not even smiling, and I slowed my slow-motion marching down until it completely stopped. Old granny legs. Mr. Coops made me sit at the side of the pool after that, so I found a seat and plunked my bum down on it, then looked to my right and did a massive blow-off out of shock. Sitting next to me was Mr. Hodgepodge, who used to be my teacher at school until he retired because he's about 300 years old. What in the loserkeelness are you doing at Mogden Poo? I said, then I remembered he was Granny Harumpadunk's boyfriend, which is probably the most loserkeel sentence in the history of sentences. Amen. Just waiting to give your old gran a lift home, he said. I see nothing's changed with you, Barry, he chuckled, giving me a nudge, and I remembered all the times he told me off at school. It's Face Snoggles, I said, pointing over at the pool. She was floating around in her inflatable ring, trying to catch the plastic goldfish hair clip, which had swum off like an actual fish. She's completely copying my loserkeelness. Looks like Bunky's hair, and also a hand. I thought you didn't want to be a loser. Mr. Hodgepodge said, looking all confused, and I got my mini berries to roll my eyes for me from inside my head. Loserkeelness is completely different from being a loser, I said, poking an old plaster on the floor with my big toe. Not that plaster I was just talking about, but looks similar, so you get the idea. Yes, well, isn't there an election for class captain coming up? He smiled, nudging me again and waggling his eyebrows, and I remembered those posters that kept blowing past in the wind. Maybe you should put yourself forward? There's nothing more loserish than being class captain, after all. It's loserkeel, not loser/sh, I grunted, waggling my foot because the plaster had got stuck. Cor, look at those legs, whispered one of the other old ladies' husbands, tapping Hodge on the shoulder and nodding over at the grannies, who were doing underwater handstands now, waggling their feet in the air. Ha ha, yes, very nice, mumbled Hodge, all embarrassed because of me, not that I cared. I swiveled my eyes over to Mr. Coops's lesson, mostly to get them away from all the old granny legs, but also to see what was happening. Nancy was synchronized swimming with Jocelyn, and Bunky was floating face down in the water pretending he drowned. Barry! 5 minutes left. Come and do a dive, shouted Mr. Coops, and I zoomed off from Mr. Hodgepodge before he could say anything else about me being class captain, because there was no way that was ever going to happen. Amen. Mini Barry gulp. Whatever you do, don't blow off, giggled Darren Darrenofsky, clambering up the ladder behind me to the middle diving board. I'd only ever